All right, so buckle up, folks, because we are diving deep today. Really deep.
Deep, dark, and twisty, might I add.
Oh, absolutely. This week's listener submission, well, it's a doozy. Someone sent in a YouTube transcript.
YouTube, okay.
Yeah, a YouTube transcript. But not just any transcript. It's a hypnoperator session, hypnotic operator.
Okay, I'm intrigued already. Who's the subject?
None other than Pope Francis himself.
Wow, that's not something you see every day.
Right. And the claims in this thing, they go way, way beyond the typical headlines. We're talking about energetic makeup, hidden power structures, global politics, the whole shebang.
Sounds like we're in for a wild ride.
You can say that again. I mean, right off the bat, we're hit with Draco DNA, comparisons to the Joker, hybrid creatures, ancient reptilian roots. It's like, whoa, hold the phone. What's going on here?
Definitely not your average papal analysis.
Not even close. So our mission, should we choose to accept it, and we kind of have to at this point, is to dig into this incredibly unique source, pull out the most fascinating bits, and try to make sense of the world it's presenting, even if it's, well, a little out there.
Even in the most unconventional frameworks, there can be internal logic and patterns. Our job is to analyze the claims as presented, follow the reasoning, and consider what it might tell us about certain worldviews.
Exactly. So where do we even start with this hypnotic journey? The participant, Diana, she has some pretty intense, immediate visual impressions of Pope Francis right from the get-go.
Right off the bat, very vivid. She describes seeing him with these exaggerated facial features, like, boom, the Joker pops into her mind. But then she also sees this dragon-like quality and these really prominent dark circles under his eyes. So already, we're outside the realm of the ordinary.
And then comes this whole Draco DNA thing. For those of us not in the loop, what does that usually mean in these circles?
Okay, important to clarify, Draco DNA here isn't referring to, like, biological DNA. In certain alternative theories, especially ones about, say, extraterrestrial or ancient reptilian influence on Earth, Draco is often used to talk about a reptilian or dragon-like lineage, an energy signature, you could say, associated with certain powerful individuals or groups throughout history.
So not genetics in the scientific sense, but more of an energetic or spiritual lineage in this context.
Exactly. It's about heritage, but not in the traditional way we think of it.
Got it. And she goes on to say that he's a hybrid, that his form isn't fixed.
Yeah, she sees this mutability, this shifting form, but one thing stays constant, that Joker smile. And she attributes this shape-shifting ability to reptilian or dragonic genetics that have kind of built up over multiple past hybridizations. So it's not just about this one lifetime. It's like a long lineage of combining different forms, energetically, maybe even physically.
Okay, so multiple incarnations leading to this. It's a pretty big concept. What's the whole point of this hybridization, according to the session? What's driving it?
Well, the motivation, as it's presented, boils down to power. Pure and simple. Diana gives this analogy. Imagine someone who's unhappy with cosmetic surgery, so they keep going back more and more until it's like distorted, deformed even.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
So this constant hybridization is seen as this relentless pursuit of power, of control, that ultimately warps the original essence, a cosmic ambition gone wrong, in a way.
So this cosmic ambition is having visible and energetic effects on him in this view, and the images Diana gets are, well, vivid to say the least. Can you walk us through some of them?
Sure. So she sees his core being as this central trunk, right? And from this trunk, all these serpent-like forms are coming out, almost like a Medusa figure starting from his feet. And where you might expect branches with flowers, she sees faces. Faces representing different stages of this hybridization. Draco faces, reptilian faces, Medusa arms. It's layered, complex, and, well, yeah, unsettling.
To put it mildly, she also talks about this moving, transparent aura around him. What's the meaning of that?
That moving aura, she compares it to a fish in a plastic bag, constantly shifting, changing shape. It emphasizes this idea of a complex, unstable energetic field, not a single unified essence, but this collection of different energies, all jumbled together in flux.
Got it. And she gets into the nitty-gritty of his energetic essence itself. What did she see there?
What struck me was her description of these multiple degraded essences all coming together. She says it forms this like porous, boiling green plasma. And that term degraded suggests something's been lost, some purity or vitality. And the plasma imagery, it's like unstable with no clear boundaries.
So a lot of power, but also chaos, leakage.
Exactly. She senses enormous power coming from him, but also this disharmony, this constant loss of energy. She compares it to a bouquet where the binding has come undone. The flowers are still potent but scattered. not unified.
And even with all this, there's still a sense of his human side trying to break through.
Yes. Diana notes this clash between the Pope's human face, his human essence, and this dominant hybrid DNA. It suggests moments of internal conflict, like a part of him is resisting these changes and the power they represent.
Okay, let's talk about a pivotal point in the session's timeline, his papal election. Apparently, that was a game changer in this whole narrative.
Yeah, according to Diana, before becoming Pope, Francis was described as having human DNA. It was after he was chosen, after that acceptance, that he either underwent or accepted further integration into this hybridization.
So the very act of becoming Pope is tied to this shift into a more hybridized state.
That's the claim. And it's at this point that the tension between his original essence and these pre-existing hybrid influences really ramps up.
And this hybrid DNA, it's not unique to him, right? It's something that builds up over time across the papacy.
That's what's fascinating. It's presented as this cumulative thing, incorporating essences of past popes, maybe even repeating essences. So each pope adds another layer, diluting any new human essence that might come in.
It's like this snowball of power-seeking energies accumulating over centuries. And Diana contrasts his human desire to do good with this bigger etheric reality.
Right. She sees this earthly inclination within him, a desire to help. But it's overshadowed by this centuries-long buildup of power-seeking energies.
And what's the end game of this whole process? What does she see happening?
The human element, she says, practically vanishes. Completely subsumed, absorbed into this dominant hybrid essence, losing all its individual distinctiveness.
Okay, let's shift gears here. The session then takes this big leap back in time, tracing this power struggle to before Christianity. What's the story there?
This is where things get really expansive. Diana takes us back to pre-Christian eras, talking about visions of these beings presented as gods interacting with early humans. She mentions Hebrews, Egyptians. It's a long, continuous history of influence.
Powerful entities engaging with human civilization from the very beginning.
Exactly. And she describes it as polytheism, with conflicts between various deities, Yahweh versus Poseidon, Zeus, all those guys. Human beliefs shifting across different civilizations.
And what did these early gods look like in her visions? What forms did they take?
She sees reptile-like beings, even dinosaur-like ones, and also incredibly tall, ethereal figures. They're interacting with humans, receiving offerings, food, animals, expressions of love, loyalty. It's like this relationship of dependency, maybe even energetic exchange.
It's a whole different way of looking at ancient history and mythology.
Yeah.
How did these beings keep their influence as human beliefs evolved?
This is key to her narrative. Diana suggests these beings were super adaptable. They changed their appearance, their presentation, to match evolving human beliefs. So Greek mythology, Roman mythology, the eventual dominance of Yahweh, it's all part of this process of shape-shifting and creating new belief systems to maintain control.
Which brings us to this idea that keeps popping up, the reptilian nature of control. How does this session flesh that out?
Diana attributes the whole shifting religious landscape to these reptilian entities. They're constantly adapting, creating new systems as humanity starts thinking for itself. It's like they're always one step ahead, finding new ways to exert influence.
And she gives some specific examples of manipulation tactics within the Catholic Church itself. Can you share some of those?
She points to the emphasis on the Virgin Mary as a strategic move to regain influence during times of scandal or declining faith. And she also talks about this future scenario where a female figure will rise to prominence in the Vatican, not as Pope, mind you, but as a support, bolstering the Church's authority as the papacy weakens.
A woman in a powerful position in the Vatican would be, well, groundbreaking. But not as Pope. Why is that?
That distinction matters. Diana sees this female leader as essentially an administrator, heavily controlled to push the Vatican's agenda. Its adaptation with control still firmly in place.
And even the spiritual practices in convents, they're seen through this lens of control.
This one is pretty striking. Diana claims convents are places where they gather and harness energy, specifically the energy generated by women during prayer and trances. It's then used for manipulation and power, and she says it's been happening throughout history.
It's a different take, that's for sure. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. The session talks about the Vatican's relationships on a global scale with other world powers. How are those portrayed?
Diana describes Pope Francis as, get this, a Medusa figure, with tentacles reaching out to connect with global leaders. The Vatican is this massive entity with influence everywhere, in every country, on every continent.
The largest planetary entity, as she puts it.
Exactly. And she claims that beneath the surface of all those official diplomatic relations, there's this whole hidden layer of absurd, sordid things, a darker side we don't see.
And then she compares the energy in convents to the energy in seminaries. What's the connection there?
She specifically calls out sexual energy in seminaries. Both types of energy, from convents and seminaries, are seen as powerful forces being utilized in this system of control.
Definitely some challenging connections there. The session then addresses Pope Francis's reduced travel compared to some previous popes. What's the explanation for that?
Diana links it to the unstable hybrid energy within him. The internal conflicts, remember. This instability, she says, makes it harder for him to project influence and expand his reach globally.
So his internal state is limiting his external impact. And there's the declining faith factor too, right?
Yes, with less faith in the papacy overall, those papal visits just don't carry the same weight anymore. So extensive travel becomes less strategically valuable.
Let's talk about the accusations that Pope Francis might be an antipope. The session has a unique take on where those accusations come from.
Diana connects them to that remaining bit of his human essence, that part that's resisting, that sees the manipulation, the problems within the church, and doesn't go along with it.
So that resistance, that human spark, is what's causing the accusations.
That's the idea. His initial good intentions, the desire for change, for simplicity, for actually helping people, it clashes with the reality of the papacy. That's where the friction comes from.
And this internal struggle has taken a toll on him, according to Diana.
Yes, she says all this conflict, this gradual surrendering of his energy, has led to serious depletion, both physically and energetically. It's been wearing him down.
And she mentions specific events, like jubilees, having a negative impact on his energy. What did she see there?
These events, she says, act like openings, like portals, that suck away more of his essence and weaken his consciousness. It might even allow other beings, the etheric beings, to enter Earth's sphere of influence.
It's a very esoteric take on these events. And this energy drain, it's not just the Pope.
Right.
It affects others within the church.
Right. She claims everyone's serving the church priests, bishops, even the faithful. They all experience this energy drain. It leads to illness, unhappiness, even if there's this temporary euphoria during services.
Okay, let's get into the specifics about Pope Francis's health. The session gives an update as of March 2nd, 2025. What does she see?
She describes his lungs as full of moving, worm-like things, and these she interprets as sadness, weariness. She also connects them to digestive problems, gas, but she does mention a slight improvement in this condition.
And emotionally, how is he doing?
She senses a lot of sadness, a lot of guilt, like he made a mistake, like he's aware of the monstrosity of the situation.
Tying back to that human part of him that's still there, the session also mentions his low energy again.
Yeah, that fatigue is seen as contributing to his reduced travel. She also mentions etheric sores in his throat, which she believes are affecting his voice. And then there's this darkness around his jaw, which suggests a cancer-like condition. And she links that symbolically to the Joker smile and the energetic imprint of previous popes, like a suction, she calls it.
So very specific, symbolic interpretations of his health issues. Let's move on to what happens after death, metaphysically. What does she see happening to the popes?
She claims there's this obligatory fusion after death. All popes, they'd become part of this collective hybrid branch. No escaping it.
No individual afterlife in this scenario. And what about reincarnation? Does that play a role in this papal lineage?
She suggests that certain popes have reincarnated throughout history to maintain control. It's about staying in the game, so to speak.
And what happens to their individual essence as they're absorbed into this collective?
The reptilian DNA, or energy signature, it takes over. Their individual essence is completely lost, dissolved into this bigger entity.
And after a pope's death, there's this reorganization period for the collective.
Yeah, upon death, the whole thing reorganizes, consolidates, regains lost energy, and then they strategize for the future.
Interestingly, Pope Francis is seen as a bit of a failure in this whole scheme. Why is that?
He hasn't been as effective as they hoped, she says. They've lost influence, resources, control, and she blames it on his conciliatory approach, that lingering human consciousness. It's a weakness in their eyes.
So he wasn't fully on board, or at least not as effectively as they wanted.
It suggested he was maybe tricked about the true nature of things and then felt powerless to make real changes. So he didn't act, and things got, well, out of hand from their perspective.
And the concept of energetic contracts comes up again. How does that relate to his fate?
She says people in these positions often signed energetic contracts, maybe through family traditions or even carried over from past lives. It binds them to this system. to this obligations.
Moving on to the actual physical events of his death, it's presented as very matter-of-fact in the session. What does she see happening?
His death, she says, won't be a surprise but a planned event. She revisits those worm-like things in his lungs and suggests their movement will just stop, like someone slipped a switch. And that'll be it for his breathing, which is already compromised.
And she doesn't see any huge public reaction like widespread grief or surprise.
No, not really. No big commotion, no outpouring of love or grief, unlike with previous popes. It's like he's lost that connection to the collective consciousness.
Okay, let's talk about this female administration that's supposed to take over. What will their role be?
She describes it as mostly administrative. Paperwork, procedures, keeping the machine running.
A figurehead, but not a true leader.
Exactly. A global presence for sure, but controlled, following orders.
So what about the future of the Catholic Church itself? Where does she see it going?
Diana predicts a gradual decline, a slow fade out, not a sudden collapse. The church won't vanish overnight, but its power will slowly erode.
An emerging of different religions in the long run.
Yes, she sees a gradual unification, a single global belief system emerging over a long period. The Catholic Church will still have representatives, but they'll be less and less influential.
New Age spirituality will keep growing too.
Absolutely. It's seen as an alternative to traditional religion, and it will continue to blend different spiritual elements.
What about church attendance? What does she see happening there?
Older folks will still go to church, keeping their traditions alive. But young people, those in their 20s and 30s, they're mostly absent. That's a sign of the decline. She does say that attendance might spike after big natural events, people looking for comfort or answers.
Interesting. And what about seminaries?
She sees them closing down, no young men becoming priests. They're exploring other paths or just not interested in religion at all. A similar decline is predicted for nuns.
So a general decline in religious faith across the board, not just Catholicism.
Yes, a broad trend affecting all religions, all denominations over time. A slow but steady shift away from traditional beliefs.
The session also touches on the Black Pope prophecy. How does that fit into all this?
Diana thinks black isn't about skin color, but about actions. A dictatorial, imposing style, less about making nice.
And this Black Pope will be the last one.
That's her prediction. He'll be the last. Because his way of doing things, his inability to get along with others, it'll coincide with this move towards religious unity through other means. The Pope becomes irrelevant.
Freemasonry also comes up. How does she connect that to the Vatican?
She claims the Vatican has its tentacles in everything, including Freemasonry. It's the center of the web, the puppet master.
And they all share these ancient origins, these similar practices.
Yes, she traces everything back to the same ancient gods or powerful beings. Same rituals, same beliefs, just different names, different facades. She mentions things like blood rituals, initiations. Mainstream religions present this nice image, rosaries, saints, all that. But groups like Freemasons, they operate in secret, but with similar underlying practices.
Okay, there's this story about a meeting between Pope Francis and a national leader. What details does she give about that?
She describes a private meeting, no microphones. But somehow a snippet of their conversation was recorded, etherically. And during this meeting, the Pope gives the leader a book. The title isn't explicitly mentioned, but it's implied to be something like Satanic Workshops.
And this is seen as a way of reinforcing alliances, right?
Right. It's like a secret handshake, a reaffirmation of shared practices, a ritual within this power dynamic.
And what happens to countries that don't play ball with the Vatican?
They face consequences, which she calls curses. Things like barren land, lack of progress, a spiritual disconnect.
All right, let's talk about the numerology of Pope Francis's election date, March 13th, 2013. Apparently, those numbers have some significance in all of this.
Yeah, numbers are symbolic in this view, representing beliefs in key moments. So Diana breaks it down. March is the third month, so 3 plus 1 plus 3 plus 2 plus 0 plus 1 plus 3 equals 13. And that reduces to 1 plus 3, which is 4. But she also sees that 9 in 2013 is flipping to a 6, so then it becomes 3 plus 3 plus 9, which is 15, and that reduces to 6. And this Pope, she says, is the third in a sequence to complete a 6. It's the consolidation of the beast, and a major cycle closes.
Wow. Okay. And she gives a possible date for his death, too, March 2025. Why is that time frame significant?
It might align with the March solstice, which is around the 21st. And numerologically, if you add the potential date 21, 2 plus 1 equals 3, plus March 3, plus 2025, which adds up to 9 and flips to 6, you get another powerful combination. It can mark a big closing, a reorganization. Energies align, power solidifies.
What if a pope doesn't fully integrate with the collective when they die? What happens then?
She describes it as a big energy leak, a disruption. Like a table missing a leg or a broken chain. It throws things off balance and could even lead to infighting, self-destruction.
Wow, so much to unpack here. The session ends with this attempt to connect with Pope Francis's human spark. Can you tell us about that?
Diana describes a way to connect with his original human essence, even though it's been subdued by the hybridization. She sees it as this tiny, almost invisible thread.
And she gets a glimpse of him before the full integration.
Yes, she sees a younger, happier Jorge Mario in a garden before all of this happened. And she guides this spark back to its source, which she describes as pure wind in a vast open space. She's trying to seal off his original timeline, protect it from further interference.
And what happens to this human spark?
It ascends, releases negative emotions, contracts all those burdens, and then it creates its own space, a beautiful high vibrational space. It expresses peace, a desire to stay in this new state, but it also acknowledges that leaving the collective won't be easy. And then the connection is severed. Diana describes it as a beautiful, sublime experience, proof of the power of the human essence.
It's a surprisingly hopeful ending to a pretty heavy session. So, to wrap up this deep dive, we've gone through some truly wild territory. Claims about Pope Francis, the Vatican, and power itself, all through this very unique lens.
Some key takeaways are those recurring themes. Hidden ancient influences shaping power. Energetic manipulation on a massive scale, and this cyclical nature of control. It's a very specific alternative view of the world.
And it's important for everyone listening to remember that this is not mainstream thinking, not by a long shot.
Right, it's a different way of seeing things, and it begs the question, how do perspectives like this, even if they seem way out there, challenge or maybe even reinforce your own understanding of power, of influence, of the institutions that shape our world? What does it mean if even figures of authority are seen as pawns in a bigger game?
A lot to think about for sure. So do your own research, be discerning, and keep an open mind. Thanks for sending in this incredible material. We love diving into the deep end with you.
Always a pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious.